Okay, we want to get started by organizing our Excel sheet. So I'm going to begin by labeling the session, phase, and dependent variable. Like I said, I'm just going to show you a multiple baseline or multiple probe across participants design with just one dependent variable. At the end, I'll show you some examples of what you would do if you wanted multiple dependent variables, or for example, if you're doing an alternating treatment. So now we have the session phase independent variable. I'm going to label this as participant 1. I'm going to use some color coding to separate participants. So now I want to copy and paste this over so that we have multiple participants. We'll change this to 2, use orange, and then do the same here for participant 3, and we'll make them green. Okay, so now that we have it organized, we are ready to start putting in our data. So I'm going to show you with some fake data, or I like to call that ideal data. We're going to pretend that our dependent variable is out of 10, so that our 10 is the maximum. So beginning with baseline, we have 5 data points, and say out of our dependent variable, our students didn't do real well. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this over so that for the purpose of this graph, everyone's data will be the same. Okay, so now participant 1, so session, I just like to keep up with either numbers or dates. That works for you. Okay. Now it's going to be intervention. I'm going to show with 5 intervention data points because that's what we would need. And so let's say we had immediate jump. This would be 9, 10, 10. Okay. Let's say our mastery criteria was 2 sessions at 10 out of 10. Okay, so that's some beautiful ideal data. Okay, because this is a multiple, let's do multiple baseline for right now. Because it's multiple baseline, that means that these guys keep going. Okay. And now that we have this trend of 3, we can begin this participant 2 in intervention. We're also going to give them 5 data points. And we can just copy and paste this all over. Okay, so this participant has also been just doing baseline this whole time. We had to wait until participant 2 had a trend, and now we can begin them in intervention. Okay, more fake data. Okay, so I think it's always a good idea to create these graphs of fake data prior to beginning a study for a couple reasons. One, it helps you think through the design decisions of when is mastery, what is my schedule going to look like, how many baseline data points am I going to need, what might my study look like in the end. It also helps you get your graph set up, as I'll show you, because then you can just delete this fake data and you already have a good template. Okay, before we make our graphs, I want to go ahead and organize our Excel sheet some more. So I'm going to come down here to where it says sheet 1. I'm going to rename that to data, and then I'm going to create a new sheet and rename it and call it graphs. Okay, so now we're ready to create we're going to make a separate graph for each tier, so for each participant, and then you're going to stack those on top of each other. Okay, so highlight the dependent variable. Now, you're putting in fake data, and we don't know for sure if there's definitely, if there's only going to be 5 intervention sessions. So a safe bet is to go a little bit more. You can always extend this, and I'll show you. So now that we've highlighted it, we're going to go to Insert. We'll come over here to the graphs. We want the scatter, XY scatter, and we want straight scatter with straight lines and markers. I kind of don't love this new version of Excel, how they don't label things. They just rely on visuals, which can be hard when it's your first time. Okay, so now I'm actually going to move this chart to graphs. Okay, so here it is. This is participant 1, I'm going to put that there. And let's do that again for the other participants. We're going to drag everyone down through 20. Insert, scatter, move chart to object in graphs. Okay, and then again with this dependent variable going down through 20, go to insert, straight mark, scatter. Okay, and to get that, again, I'm like right clicking or control click on a Mac, move chart, object in graphs. Okay, so now I've got my 3 tiers. As I said, we now have a lot of work to do to clean these up. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. Okay, first of all, delete chart title. Then go to where you're highlighting the whole box, right click, go to format chart area. Fill, you want no fill. Border, you want no line. Basically, you're just going to repeat that over and over. Same thing for here, the chart area. Format plot area, fill, no fill, border, no line. Okay. We now want to take away these grid lines. So you want no lines. It's actually kind of hard to see. So I'm going to go up here to view, and you can actually take these grid lines in and out. Sometimes I think they're really helpful, but right now it's a little bit messy. Okay, so now we're also going to take away, format these grid lines. You want no lines. Okay, so it's nice and clean. All we want are the lines for the X and Y axis. Now, I'm not really sure why Excel, or at least my Excel, automatically goes to this gray color. I think it's much cleaner to have black. Okay, and so again, you're going to, anytime you click on something, generally the format comes up. So if you want to adjust anything, find format, whatever you're doing. Okay, and so we want to go, we don't want any fills, but see how the line is automatic and it's this light gray? We want to change that to black. And let's do that for the x-axis as well. Okay. All right, while we're working on the axes, remember our dependent variable was 10 as the maximum. Excel normally just automatically gives you a little bit extra, but if in single case you're looking at this graph as a reviewer, I would assume then your dependent variable is out of 12. So to change this, we want to have this highlighted, and then you want to go to bounds. And so the maximum that you want is 10. Enter that. This is also where you can change it. Let's say that it's out of 100. So just for example, maybe you don't want it by tens. Maybe you want it by 20. So you would change the major unit to 20, for example. Or if you want it by ones, but you know, nobody can read that. All right, so let's go back to our 10. Okay, so now let's change the labeling of our x-axis. Okay, so again, we have our minimum. We do want to keep the minimum at 0. Maximum of 20 is fine, but the units only showing every 5 can be, I don't think that's quite enough. So out of 20, let's see what it looks like if we just label all of them. I think that's fine. I don't think that's too messy. Okay. The next thing we need to add are tick marks. Okay, so we go down here to tick marks, and we want major tick marks. We want them inside. Okay, so that is inside, that is outside, that is wrong. Okay, we want them inside. So again, click over here, format access, tick marks, inside. Okay, all right, now there's more we need to fix, but I'm going to repeat this with the next two tiers just to give you some repeated practice. So I'm going to delete the chart title. I'm going to delete these grid lines, you can actually just hit the delete button for those. I'm going to put no fill, no line. I'm going to change my axes lines to black. Nice and easy to see. I'm going to click my axis. Now I'm over here with like how it looks. To get to the axis options is what you want. So go over here to the little bar chart area, axis options. I want my major unit to be 1, and my maximum is 10. Okay, so that it matches up there. I'm going to go down and do the same thing to my x-axis. Change the major to 1. It's also why it's helpful to just do one tier at a time, so then you can really make all your decisions, decide how you like it, and then just repeat it. Okay, so now we're going to put our tick marks inside. Same here, tick marks inside. Okay, now let's repeat for the last one. Delete that chart title. Delete those grid lines. Change to no fill, no border. Okay, so now they're just nice and floating. If I want to go over here to go ahead and fix my axis options, or the color, there we go. That didn't seem to fix over there. Let's see what I did wrong. There we go. Okay, now we're going to fix the bounds to go up to 10 with a major unit of 1. And down here, we're on the x-axis, we're going to change our major axis to 1. Add our tick marks inside. Okay. All right, now that we have these formatted correctly, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to move them. So I'm going to make those grid lines come back. And it's really easy if you just line up the y-axis with this column line. It helps you get everything nice and aligned. I want these things sort of close. So maybe I'm going to go about halfway up. And this one, drag over halfway up. Okay. All right. One thing we can go ahead and do is we don't actually need the session labels for the first 2 tiers. You just leave them at the 3rd tier. That's part of why we line them up. So the way that you make those go away is just change the font to white. Okay, so I'm going to do that here as well. I'm just going to change the font to white, and then it goes away. And that's part of the reason we want those tick marks. And then you just have the labels at on the bottom tier. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is fix our markings. So we don't want to rely on color. Most journals actually don't want color. They want only black and white. And so as we'll get into when I show you, if you have multiple dependent variables, you want to use shapes and shading. So for example, if they're closed or open, filled or not filled, to distinguish. Okay, so you notice how I clicked one and the whole series lit up. That's what I want right now. And you want it to, over here, to say Format Data Series. Go to the little paint can, and this is where it tells us about the line, and we can change the color of the line just to show you what I'm doing, but we want black. Then we can click over here to Marker, which is what these little dots are called, and we want to also change that to black. And then go up here to Marker Options. This is where you could change it to an X, for example, or a square. Pretty much the standard, especially if you only have one dependent variable, is to just use a circle. There is no need to have one for baseline and one for intervention. The marker should be the same if what you're measuring is the same. Okay, I like to make my marker size 7. I think that it pops and it makes it a little bit easier to see if they are bigger, substantially bigger than the line. Oh, I noticed one thing I didn't do. So go back into my data series, my marker. Notice that my marker border, so I don't know if you can tell, but around the outside it's blue. So we forgot to change that marker border to black. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to, let's go ahead and do it for the other tiers. Okay, we'll chunk it up. So click so that all or most are highlighted and it says Format Data Series over here. We'll change our line first to black. If you wanted to make your line more thin, that's where you do width, or you can make it super thick, okay? But really 1.5 is a good amount, is a good width. Now if we go to marker, again, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to change the color to black for the fill, and the border to black. Okay, now we're going to go down to the third tier. Same thing, clicking it so that all are highlighted and it says Format Data Series. I'm first going to change the line, then change the marker, make it a little bigger, change the fill to black, change this to black. Okay, now it's time to separate baseline from intervention. So something that I often see from people who just don't know better is they think that to get a skip here, to break this line, what they do is they like leave a space, okay? And if you leave a space, it'll break it. But that's not accurate, right? Because remember, our x-axis is measuring time. So the way this looks, it looks like you had measurement on session 5 and measurement on session 7, when that's not really what happened. You took something on session 6. Okay, so I'm going to undo this and show you how you actually break the lines. Okay, that gets especially problematic as you get into second and third tiers and when you're using a multiple probe design. I'll talk about multiple probe in a separate video. Okay, so you want to click. So the way that it works is if you want to break this line, you need to change that within the marker following it. So if I wanted to change this line, I would change that marker. So what you do is click your first intervention point. You want to make sure it says Format Data Point, not Data Series, because we're only wanting to affect the one. Go over here to the paint cannon line and click No Line. Okay, and that deletes that line. So repeating it here, I'm going to go to my first intervention day. If you notice, I'll do that again. See how all of them are highlighted? I don't want to do that because if I click No Line, all the lines go away. Okay, what I want is to just have the one and click No Line. Okay, now on the last one, same thing, No Line. Okay, now we need to insert those phase change lines. So I'm going to go to Insert, Shapes, Line. And I'm going to pull one right here in between, trying to get it as good as possible. Now it's blue. I don't know why. If somebody could tell me how to not make them all blue, that'd be great. I'm actually going to make this one up to the width of 1. You saw how I did that just to make it a little bit easier. So your first phase line, the baseline to intervention phase line, should be solid. Okay. Now you can just copy and paste that line you already did. Okay. I'm going to do one more from scratch just so that I can model how to do it again. So you go to Insert, Shapes, Line, drag it up. Okay. And then over here, I want to change it to black. I'm going to make it worth the width of 1 to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we have the clear phase change lines, but I need to connect them. Okay, so I'm going to insert another line and go from this phase line, oop, I can't see it, to this phase line. Okay, and click it so that my format shape comes up. I need to change it to black 1. Okay, I'm going to leave it solid. I'm just going to copy and paste it to connect down here. Okay, so now it's looking pretty good. What we have left to add are our labels. Okay, so to add in the labels of the phases, you first want to insert a text box up here. And this is baseline. And actually, I like to, you don't want any line, you don't want any fill. Okay, you just want it floating up above. I'm going to copy and paste that text box just so I don't have to create another one and format it again. And this one is intervention. Let's put that up again. Again, we're going to make the grid lines go away, so you don't have to worry about if it's going through. So for example, we'll go to view, take out the grid lines, right? So you can ignore those. Now I'm going to copy and paste this text box again, and this is going to be our participant 1. So we'll call him Sonia, and then participant 2, maybe that's Ramona, and participant 3 is Dorinda. Okay, some people like for these to be in boxes and not just floating, and so in that case we would just go back over here and add a line. And probably share it up a little bit. That line is gray, not sure why. So make it black. Again, click this one, solid line. It remembered I wanted it to be black. Just a little bit. And Dorinda, we also want you to have a solid line. Okay, so now I've added my participant labels, got my phase labels. Last thing that I need to add is my y-axis label. So what was I measuring? So let's pretend, because this is all made up data, so I just copied and pasted that text box, and it's going to be number of words identified dependently. Okay, and I'm going to twist it. Some people prefer for this to be in all caps. Some people don't. That's totally personal preference. I do think it's helpful to make it slightly bigger. If you notice, all of these fonts should be the same, but it's okay for this one to be a little bit bigger, like maybe 14. If you're making a poster, it definitely needs to be bigger because otherwise no one can see it. All right, and then I'm going to take away the line, so it's just floating. Okay, so if we zoom out, we now have a very nice and clean looking multiple baseline across participants graph. Okay, so now I want to show you a couple examples of other graphs, primarily multiple probe graphs and graphs that have more data. So if you take a look at this sheet, you can see we had 3 participants, right? But I kept track of the dates over here, the date of when data was taken, and then the session here. We only have one dependent variable, okay, out of, I believe the scale was 24. So if we take a look at everyone's baseline data, you can see we had baseline data points. Oh, we also did take data on generalization, so that's a separate, so we would mark that as like baseline generalization over here. So you can see here how, for example, this person only had 4 data points taken and then generalization. This person only had 3 data points and then we were able to skip it, and that's because it's a multiple baseline. So in this case, you do sort of skip in the data. So this is saying, if we read this, that on March 12th, we took a baseline 4 for green, we took a baseline 4 for wood, but AC didn't get anything, and that's okay because she's the 3rd tier. It's using baseline logic. Okay, and so that's why you see these gaps, is because we were using a multiple probe design versus multiple baseline. And then you see we took 1 generalization data point for each person in baseline, and then we took one generalization data point for each person and intervention. We go to the graph and see what this looks like. We made our generalization data point open. And so the way that you do that, so let's say I want to make this one open, just for example. I'm going to go here to the marker, and instead of fill, instead of solid fill, I'd have no fill. Okay, so that would make that data point open. I'm going to undo that though. This is real data. Okay, so we indicate in this case our generalization data points are open data points. So you can see this is a multiple probe, not a multiple baseline, because we have some areas where it's skipped in baseline following those What Works Clearinghouse rules. Similarly, you see skips here, and that's because no data was taken, the student was absent. Okay. To show you another example of how you can use this data sheet or the Excel sheet to really keep up with your data. So you see we have 3 participants here with their pseudonyms at the top. In this case, we actually had 2 dependent variables, solving tip problems and solving sale problems. So in this case, when you put in your data and you want to create your graph, instead of just dragging and highlighting the one, which in this case is quite a bit of data, so you go all the way down to here, you highlight both columns and then go to Insert, Scatter. Okay. In this study, students solve problems on different themes. So if you have a time where you want to keep up with what did the students do that day, so for example, if you're having them read different books, then you can use this to take to keep record of that. So this was a baseline, but it was the nail theme. This was baseline, but it was the hotel theme. Okay, and you see how we kept data on both of our dependent variables here. We have our dates, and then I also add a column for IOA and procedural fidelity. It just makes it a really easy place to keep up with that. Makes it easy to see if we're going below the thresholds, if I have enough. It's nice to have it all in one place. And then the highlights are sort of our own codes for things that need to happen. And if we look at this graph, what I wanted to show you here was how we have these different phases. Okay, so baseline, similarly, we used open for generalization data, closed for our primary dependent variable. We were taking data on solving 2 types of problems. So we took data on solving increased problems or decreased problems, tip and sale. So you can see how the increased problems are all circles. The decreased problems are all triangles. Those are very easy to see the difference between them. And then open was generalization. We still used a solid line in between baseline and intervention consistently across all participants, but we then had these other phases. So students learned how to solve one type of problem, and then we gave them a probe, a second type of problem, probe, taught them to discriminate between them, and then maintenance. So to show this is all intervention, okay, but there's phases of intervention. And so to show that, we use dotted lines. So similarly, when you're creating a line, so I want to format that. If you go down here to dash type, normally it's solid, but then you can change it to a dash line. Okay, I think that's all the interesting. And then similarly, when you connect those across participants, you use a dashed line there as well. You see here how actually Faith finished before Leona, and so instead of going to the right, in this case, it actually went to the left, but it just helps readers to sort of follow those different intervention phases. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is what to do if you have a what to do if you have a reversal, withdrawal, or ABAB design, okay? Because when we look at this, we see, well, yes, there's an A baseline and a B intervention staggered across participants. But what if, for example, we were doing an intervention and then taking it away? So I'm going to leave our formats. I'm just going to show you for our first participant for right now. So let's say we had our baseline, our intervention, and a withdrawal. We would go back to baseline. Okay, I'm just going to copy the same data. Let's say whatever you're doing worked really well, reversed, and then we had 5 more intervention data points. Okay, so you can see here from the data we have A, B, A, B. But so look what that did to our graph. Okay, so what we would then need to do, sort of the formatting from before, all with, stays the same, but we need to show that there's a phase change here. So we're going to go to line, take away that line, okay, and then here's where intervention happened again, take away that line. And then we can't use a solid line again, but I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it, and then go down here to dash type, and dash type again. Now we'll also need to change these. So we'll need to label all of our phases. So this is also a baseline, and this is also intervention. It's actually, you wouldn't call it baseline, you call it probe. Okay, or B. So we'll call this A, B, A, B. Okay, so then I could, you could always stagger. You wouldn't need to stagger in time, but we could have this for multiple participants. Okay, so that's also how you would graph a reversal or withdrawal or ABAB, whatever you call it. You again just keep in the same participant because it's going to be in the same graph, and you just keep going down.